20 minutes remaining, so let's just try and cover as much as we can. Yeah, so the code that was displayed on the screen was for students that are on campus. So the code for everyone on Blackboard, I posted it on Blackboard. Yeah, so today we'll be doing the SSA paper. So we finished the main paper yesterday, and yeah, so let's look at how the SSA paper looks. Okay, so question 1, graphical user interfaces. So basically we need to discuss the changes that are required to main in order for it to become a JavaFX application, right? So let's try and do that. Okay, so in this case, we just have a class called main, and we have the main method. So let's write that out. Yeah, and then this is inside of the main class. And let's just put it there. All right, so what changes do we need to make this a JavaFX application in terms of code? Who wants to try? Yes. Yes, so that's the first thing that we would do. So make main, extend, application. Yeah, so got our first mark. What else do we need to do? Okay, so yeah, so we call the launch method, pass the arguments as a parameter, and then because we are extending application, we need to obviously override the start method, right? So override that. And this would be also a public method. And it takes a stage as a parameter. Yeah, and then so let's, for example, create a scene. And then we can just provide a scene and primary stage dot start. Yeah, so that's so obviously when you run this, then you have the UI pop up, and that's our most basic JavaFX application. So in terms of the mark allocation, here you got a mark for extending application. So that's one mark. And then you got a mark for calling the launch method. And then you got a mark for overriding the start method. And then you got a mark for so this basically like so you got the mark for this tick applies to all of this, right? So override and then the method prototype. So you must take the stage as the parameter. Okay, and then you got a mark for, so this is 1, 2, 3. So then you got a mark for creating a scene. That's the most basic thing you need for a JavaFX application. And then obviously starting the stage. So you got a mark for that. Oh yeah, this is show. It's not multi-threading, so we're not starting a thread. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be the mark allocation for that. Yeah, so see if there's questions on Blackboard. Okay, no questions. All right, so analyze the following Java code segments and answer the questions that follow. So we have a canvas, and then we have an action listener. So set on mouse moved, right? So when someone moves the mouse on the canvas, we want the canvas to react in a certain way, right? So then we instantiate an event handler, passing the mouse event as a parameter, and then we override the handle method, and then we print that message, right? So very straightforward. Worth noting that this could also be an action event. So yeah, okay, but in any case. So in this case, then what we do is we want to answer these questions. So which signal is being created? In that case, what signal is being created? So which event is being created? Okay, yeah, so action events, but strictly speaking, you would have to say that it's a mouse event, right? Because this has to do with moving the mouse, right? So then you would get a mark for that. So it's a mouse event. And then also you can say something like the mouse, like a mouse moved event or something like that. So anything that says that the signal is that the mouse was moved by the user, that gets you the marks, right? As long as you mention that it's the mouse, right? That's the most important thing. Okay, so event handler is an interface. On line 2, it's being created. Why does this compile? Given the fact that an interface cannot be created. So we answered this in the previous paper as well. The reason it compiles is because this is an anonymous inner class, right? So we are not really creating like an instance and assigning it to a variable. We are simply creating an anonymous inner class and implementing the handle method, right, in order to handle the event, right? So that's important. So you get 1 mark for mentioning anonymous inner class, and then you get the other mark to mention that it is being used here to just create an instance of the event handler, right? So it's not really being given a name, right? You're not assigning it to a variable. Okay, and that's why that works. Because as soon as you reach this point, the class disappears and no longer exists. Okay, so discuss the relationship between an event and an event handler. So that question was in the main paper as well. Anyone wants to try? Let's see on Blackboard. Okay. Okay, so just to save time, remember an event is a signal that something happened, right? So an event is a signal that an action was performed. An event handler is responsible for handling that event. So it does something when that signal occurs, right? So it reacts to that signal. So you can also say an event handler listens for an event, and then it handles the event by performing a task, right? So whichever of those statements will give you a mark. So yeah, so remember 1 mark per fact, right? So if you just remember that, then you should be fine. So you can't expect to mention one thing and get 2 marks. Okay, so let's move to binary I/O. So when would you use an object output stream over a print writer to store data persistently. So when would you use an object output stream over a print writer? So the question was basically the other way around the main test, right? It was when would you use a print writer over an object output stream, but you would use an object output stream if you don't need human readable files, right? So if you just want to store the data in a file and you don't care about it being human readable, then you would store it using an object output stream, right? Also, object output streams are easier to use with Java because you don't have to worry about formatting the string. So they are easier to use. And also, object output streams are less error prone, right? So, for example, you don't have to worry about um, like using tab characters and space characters, and like all of that stuff, and like making sure that your data looks um, correctly formatted, right? So the only thing that matters is that you're just writing the data to a file and you're reading it from a file, right? So that's much easier and it's much safer. Okay, so which data members of the following class will be written to file with an object output stream? So we have a stream class that implements serializable. So definitely, if a class implements serializable, it can be written to file. However, we have these three data types. So if you remember, um, we mentioned that transient and static data types, or rather transients and static data, cannot be serialized, right? So it's not serializable. So even if this class is serializable, um, these two variables will not be written to the file, right? So that's the most important thing. So you would just say, because it's 2 marks, so which will be written to file? So delta will be written to file. The reason is that the other variables are not serializable, right? Or you can say transient and static data is not serializable. Okay, so let's see if any questions. Yes, that is true. That's 100%. Okay, so on to generics. So we need to analyze the following Java code segments and answer the questions that follow. So we have a class called generic creator, which takes an X and Y parameter, which represent types. And then so we have a simple variable X, we have an advanced variable Y, and then we have a method called init, and I'm assuming it's for initializing. It takes X as a variable and it prints that, and then it sets this, and then so we have another method that creates Y, right? So advanced is new Y. So the code shown above does not compile, indicate the lines where the problems occur, and provide Java source code that will correct the problem, right? So why does this code not compile? Okay, so no one wants to try. Okay, so someone says line 4 and 6, or line 4 to 6. So let's look at that. Line 4 to 6. Okay, that is true because you can't use static with generics, right? So you should rather just either remove the static modifier, or um, like remove the generic parameter, right? So I'm assuming because this is a like a static method, you wouldn't want to change that. Then you shouldn't provide a generic parameter. You'd rather provide different parameter, right? But so you can't use um, the static modifier with generics. Okay. Okay, and then let's look at the other one. So cannot create an array of generic. Yeah, so you cannot create a generic array. So you can't do this because new obviously allocates memory, creates an instance. We don't really know what this is, so we can't do those two things. Well, in this case, we're just allocating memory, but using new and generics usually just it never works, right? So and also in Java, you can't create a generic array, right? So this is just a limitation in Java. Um, so if we wanted to fix this, we would have to create an object array. So we would have to do something like this. So we would have to say, so let's just see what the name of the method is. So create y. Actually, like all you need to do is just provide the line. So you can just say advanced is new, and then what you do is you create an object array. So object array, and then you cast that to the type that you want to use. So in this case, our type is y, right? So this is how actually this would also give you an error. You'd have to do this. All right, so this is also in the lecture slides. So no new information here, but yeah, so you can't create an array of generic type. So you have to create an array of objects and then make a cast to the generic type, and that should work. So some compilers will give you a warning if you do this. They'll say that what you're doing is not a safe operation because the compiler does not yet know um, the type of Y, but it will let you compile your code, right? So it will compile, but with some compilers, you can get a warning if you do that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so oh yeah, so we are basically out of time. So tomorrow we will do the last two questions. So question 4 and question 5, which is the cold code section. So apologies for the delay. So there was a problem with the projector, but hopefully it doesn't happen again. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.